Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough, and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, our guest today is so wise, and I actually listened to this interview twice because I loved it so much. You know, he says some things that you need to be ready for. Listeners, I want to prepare you. There's some fire in this interview. And this is going to just spark your heart for children's ministry and for the next generation, and really for parenting and disciple making in the home. So I'm really excited about what Dale Hudson has to say. He goes into talking about the different soils from the scripture, and we kind of got to talking off the air about plants and botany. And so, guys, I wanted to ask you about, do you guys plant new trees in the spring? Do you have a desire to keep plants alive? What is your take on planting?
I don't mind jumping right in if you want me to with this one, because I am I do not have a green thumb. I don't know what the opposite of a green thumb is, but that's what I have. Like, I couldn't keep a plant alive to save my life. To me, I think fake plants and flowers are wonderful because you don't have to care for them. You dust them every once in a while. And my wife is the exact opposite. We had this dilemma. I had bought 6 brand new trees that were not cheap to have planted in our backyard. And some fungus came through and killed 4 of them.
No.
And my sweet wife was like, well, we have to dig them up and buy new. And I had seen online somebody spray paint these things green, and just that's the way they were. And you couldn't hardly tell the difference. And we had a large discussion about me spray painting these trees green in the backyard, because to me, it did not matter whether it was live or dead, or I didn't want to spend the money on more plants. That was my philosophy.
I'm with you, Josh. I have planted 38 trees since we've lived on our property here.
Oh my goodness.
And Pam and I have wanted to line our driveway with the white blooms of dogwood trees. And so we planted 8, 4 on each side. And within the year, they all died. So the nursery came out and replanted them for us.
Oh my.
And they all died. And so I brought in a different nursery company, and they said, yeah, your soil is too wet for dogwoods. So why didn't the first people tell me after I spent the money on them? Yeah. So I planted red pansies so that we could have these red blooms, but I didn't do 4 on each side. We did 3 on each side. And we planted an autumn blaze maple in the front, an autumn blaze maple in the back, 2 Japanese maples, and a cherry tree and a poplar tree. So all in all, we planted 38 trees. You know how many of them are still alive today? 8 of
12.
them. Thank goodness our Japanese maples, our autumn blaze maples, and the cherry and the poplar. So Pam and I have a phrase: we're where plants and trees come to die. We're the plant hospice. So that's us.
I'm the same way.
Hospice, yeah.
I think there is a market out there for fake trees, large fake trees and plants that will not die in people's yards. Like I would go my whole front landscaping, flower beds, just go all fake, baby.
So if Jesus were talking about the types of soil and he were walking by our property, he'd point and go, that's not good soil. The
Yes.
hunters are not where you want to be planted. So
No.
I'm the bad example.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
with you.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah.
What about you, Marianne?
Well, I'm a crepe myrtle girl. And I love crepe myrtles because I live in Texas, and when they bloom in the summer, and if you know anything about Texas, it's burning hot most of the time in the summer. And they bloom beautiful. They're most beautiful when it's hotter. So the hotter it is here, the more beautiful they bloom. And so I have a crepe myrtle right outside of my office window, and I try same thing as you guys, Josh. It got some sort of a fungus. I got online, I scrubbed it, I put coffee grounds in it. I did all the things. I got neem oil on it. You guys, I've done everything, and it's dead. And so we're gonna have to replace it.
Oh no.
So, one of the things that I love about this interview as we transition into it is, he really talks about, planting seeds into a future generation and understanding this next generation of Gen Alpha coming up. And then what do we do with this new generation, and how strategic do we need to be? And so I just want to encourage you to listen to this interview. It is a fantastic interview. He says some really fire things. So buckle up, and we will talk on the other side of this interview.
The D6 Conference is thrilled to present a lineup of more than 70 experts specializing in family ministry who are ready to inspire, challenge, and equip you with strategies for generational discipleship. Guided by the teachings of Deuteronomy 6, which calls for a love for God and a full-hearted engagement with His Word and impressing His Word on the hearts of families, the D6 Conference is meticulously crafted to instruct, empower, and inspire ministry leaders, parents, pastors, and volunteers to embody the vision and mission laid out in this sacred text. This event stands as a premier family ministry conference, offering invaluable opportunity for your entire team to be inspired, engage in idea exchanges, and foster new relationships with like-minded church leaders. With the choice of breakout sessions led by leading voices in family ministry, you're guaranteed to walk away equipped with practical tools and resources that will prove instrumental in your ministry. Whether in Orlando or Seattle, we invite you in 2024 to be a part of this transformative conversation and explore how you can adopt an all-inclusive approach to discipleship for both your church and your home. Don't miss out on this chance to elevate your discipleship approach. Register now at d6conference.com.
Right now, I am joined by Dale Hudson. Dale has been serving in children's and family ministry for over 33 years. Dale has helped build and lead some of the largest children's ministries in the nation. He is the founder and president of Building Children's Ministries. BCM helps churches build strong teams, leaders, and ministries. Dale, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Excited about it.
Well, we're talking about Gen Alpha, which may be a term that a lot of people don't know about. Before we even jump into everything with Gen Alpha, can you talk about what Gen Alpha is? Because, I think about, we know millennials, Generation Y, a little bit about Generation Z, but Gen Alpha is kind of a newer term that's out there.
It is, yeah. I mean, Gen Z refers to kids born between 1995 and 2012. The stats vary from study to study, but approximately. And then Gen Alpha, they were kids born between 2013 and 2025, so some of them haven't even been born yet. But those are the babies in our nursery, our preschool, our lower elementary kids. That's them. There's 2.5 million Gen Alpha kids born each week. Can you believe that? So by 2025, there's supposed to be 2.5 billion Gen Alpha kids.
Wow.
So they're coming on the scene well.
Well, and this is kind of a weird question because you said some of these kids haven't been born yet, but I'm curious what we know about the defining characteristics, which is tough to say. What are the characteristics of someone that's going to be born in 2 years? We don't know that, but we may have some idea. So what are some of the things that we're seeing with this Gen Alpha generation?
Yeah, so they're the first generation born entirely in the 21st century.
Yeah, I'm feeling old.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I was at the store the other day, and they said, you want the senior citizen discount? And I was like, what? It's the first time I'd ever been asked that. But anyways, they, born entirely in the 21st century. And let's be honest, childhood has changed. It's different than when we were kids.
Yeah.
So Gen Alpha's in a new generation with kids that are growing up in a world far different than what we grew up with. Very technology driven. They have never known a world without apps. They're born into technology, not adapted to it. They're born into it. That's what they're born into. Social media is going to be a big part of their lives, of course. On internet, so forth. I always say if you want to get a family meeting, just turn off the router and they'll come running. Especially if you have older kids. You turn off the router, they're coming. So they're immersed in technology. Smartphones, I think like 50% of 11-year-olds have a smartphone already. And so they also, which we are growing into, but they're born into, is instead of typing, talking. Hey Siri. That's they never know a world without Hey Siri, right? So they do a lot more voice activation stuff than we did when we were, first introduced to technology at our age. On demand, they're very used to on demand. When we were kids, cartoons came on Saturday morning. If you missed it, you just missed it. There was no on demand to watch it. But of course, now they can pull up anything at any time. Very, very educated. 50% will have a college degree. Living arrangements, they're coming from a wide variety of families. Blended families, single parent families, all the different arrangements, living arrangements. They can have unlimited knowledge. They can go to YouTube and find out how to fix anything. You ever done that before? Went on YouTube to find out how to fix something?
Oh yeah, either fix it or make it worse.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I've got a sink right now that really needs it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Their attention span is. It used to be the stat was 1 minute for every year of your age. Like if you're one, you have about a minute. 2-year-olds, you have about 2 minutes to keep their attention. I really believe with Gen Alpha, it's seconds. There's so much information coming at them that they kind of sort through it really quickly and grab what they want to put their attention on at that time. And so really they're focused on family growing up. They're climate advocates. They are very passionate about inclusiveness, and they have a lot of time they spend online. So I would say those are some of the general characteristics of Gen Alpha as they're growing up.
Well, I want to jump ahead in time a little bit.
Sure.
You've shared that there are 3 main reasons that kids walk away from their faith. Can you share those 3 reasons with us? And I'm going to kind of get back to why this applies to Gen Alpha, but for this, can you share those 3 main reasons with us?
Yeah, you bet. So there was a survey done among nuns, not Catholic nun, but NONES. These are people that would say, I have no religion. If they were filling out an application and it said Catholic or Protestant, they would say no religion. What's scary is 78% of nuns grew up in church. 78% grew up in church. Wow. So there's 3 big reasons. I did the research, and they actually did a survey with a group of nuns and said, why'd you walk away? So they gave 3 main reasons why they walked away. The first one was they became disillusioned with the church. About 25% said church politics, moral failures, misuse of funds. We're just disillusioned with the church. The biggest reason, the second one, was like 50% said we just don't believe anymore. We just don't believe the Bible anymore. We don't believe anymore. And the last one was 25% said we're just too busy to go to church and be involved in spiritual things, which I hate to say it, but I think they probably learned that from their parents.
Yeah.
Not making church a priority. So those are the big 3 that the nuns said this is why we walked away. And so we can create this, well, I'll get into that just in a minute, but we can create fertile soil that they'll be planted in, they can grow. Because if you take those 3 reasons, and I was studying the parable of the different seeds that were sown, if you take these 3 reasons and lay them on top of those types of soil, they match up perfectly. Like disillusionment with the church, the footpath. Some seeds went on the footpath. That was a hard path. People walked up and down it. People walked on the seeds and crushed the seeds. Birds took them away, which would be people when they don't walk the talk. It's like we're crushing the faith of the next generation. The thing about don't believe anymore, some of them were cast on shallow ground, and they withered away when the heat came. When they got to college and heard about evolution, they had no answers, and so they wilted away. And the third one, too busy, talks about the thorny soil. Choked out the seed. Busyness choked out the seed. Wrong priorities choked out the seed. And so they line up perfectly with what God's Word says about why people walk away from the faith or walk away from the church.
Yeah, and now to kind of tie this back in, and this is why I went there in the first place.
Yeah.
When we think about people walking away from their faith, we think of college students, we think of young adults.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to think about that 3-year-old singing "Jesus Loves Me" as someone who might potentially walk away from their faith.
Yeah.
So as difficult as that is to comprehend, why is it so important that we begin teaching important truths early on and often?
Yeah, for sure. There's a quote that has really seared into my mind. George Barna, he said, "In the race to a child's heart, the first one there wins."
Wow.
And so we've got to get there first. I use the analogy of kids are like wet cement. We hear that all the time. You can ride in wet cement, you can, mold it, but there's just this window of time until wet cement becomes concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And to bust concrete, you got to have a jackhammer or a chisel. And that's kind of the heart of a child, is like wet cement. But there's just this short window of time we have until their hearts become like concrete if they don't know Christ. And so it's really important we get there first in those early years. Babysitting, nursery's not babysitting. It's preschool. It's ministry at one of the most important time in a person's life. Those first 2 or 3 years, so many brain connections are being made. And we've got to get there first with God's words and plant those seeds and get that foundation ready so the faith will rest upon that. So I would say that's why we've got to get there first.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Dale a little bit more about Gen Alpha and what that means for the church.
Imagine families in your church thriving in their faith, blossoming with engagement. Kids who are curious and excited, parents who are inspired, and the unmistakable sound of joyous discipleship echoing through your halls. Yes, it's possible. Even in today's whirlwind of schedules and screens, your church can be a haven of family faith. But let's face it, reaching families today is tough. The changing landscape, the distractions, the packed calendars. That's exactly why there's D6 Home Point, a beacon of support for churches striving to strengthen family discipleship. Our strategic model is crafted to meet the needs of churches just like yours, all across the country. Join the hundreds of churches that have witnessed the beautiful transformation of families and the blooming of ministries with our proven approach. Our resources are as diverse as your congregation. From on-campus programs to dynamic online tools, we provide a treasure trove of customizable materials that blend seamlessly into the fabric of your unique church community. Don't let this opportunity pass your church by. To find out how D6 Home Point can revitalize family discipleship in your community, visit d6homepoint.com.
We're back, and we're talking with Dale Hudson about Gen Alpha, our youngest kids that we are called to disciple. And as you mentioned, some that have not even quite been born yet. Right. They are still to come. Yeah. Just thinking practically, how can we help our babies, our preschoolers, our elementary kids fall in love with Jesus?
Yeah, I think we start in the nursery. Have a time where you pray over them. Have a time where you read God's word over them. They're absorbing more than we realize. I actually, at the last church I served at, we put Bible prayer verses up in the walls of each preschool and nursery room. Mm-hmm. And sometime during the service, our leaders would pray that prayer over those kids. And then, of course, preschool, they can soak up a lot of stuff. So teaching them, it's really, really important. And of course, elementary and preteens is so important. I think we're falling short on teaching apologetics and doctrine, and we see a very shallow faith. When I'm not traveling, I volunteer in the kids ministry at my brother's church. He's a pastor, and so I kind of love it. It's the first time I've ever volunteered and hadn't been paid to be in children's ministry, so I love it. But I teach the preteens, and a couple months ago I asked them. I said, "What does John 3:16 say?" And not one of those kids could quote John 3:16. And these are kids that kind of been in church for several years. Well, any miracles that you can name in the Bible? No answer. And so it's critical that we realize they're our greatest mission field. Yeah. And we've got to get them before they get in that window of time where their heart's like concrete now.
Yeah.
And so from an early age, it's so important to get there first.
Yeah. Now, I hate to go old man here and be like, back in my day, we had dial-up internet and AOL and stuff like that, which, yes, that's what it was like. But as you mentioned earlier, kids growing up today, they'll never know life without social media. They'll never know life without smartphones, streaming services, apps, and things like that.
Yeah.
Do we need to adjust our approach to discipleship to reach Gen Alpha, or should we stick with the same tried and true methods?
I think it's not either or, but both and.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anything can take the place of a kid coming to a church and sitting down face to face with a leader that cares about them and invests in their life. Obviously, online stuff is great, but it can be used and should be used. But I think there's a balance there. I just really believe that personal, because discipleship happens through relationships, right?
Yeah.
So they've got to have a relationship with the leader at church that's going to pour into them and miss them when they're not there, that's going to know their name, that's going to pray for them. And so I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Well, for the church that is seeing the need, what are some good first steps that can be taken to make sure they're being intentional in their discipleship of Gen Alpha?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it all comes down to relationships. And we've got to lead our volunteers to know that. We cannot have volunteers sitting over to the side during large group time studying their lesson. Some of them, I think, study their lesson almost at the stoplights on the way to church.
I've seen it happen.
But been back there in the back. Instead of, get in there with those kids. In the 90s, when in kids ministry in the 90s, a lot of churches and I did this, would put video games, in the rooms for the kids to play pre-service.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do that anymore, because these kids are video gamed 24/7. They probably played a game on the way to church on their phone or their little Wii thing that they have, game console. And so I changed that, took out the video games, and we have put in like the big Connect 4, big checkers, things that just not staring at a TV, but things they can engage with those kids. Jenga, is that how you say it? You pull the blocks out?
Mm-hmm.
All those physical games we put in there instead of video games, because the kids love them, and gives you a chance to interact and talk with them face to face.
Yeah.
And pour into them. Because the saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I try to help our volunteers understand that you're going to build those relationships face to face. So, every minute you're there, be engaged with those kids.
Yeah, well, Dale, I appreciate you sharing this. Like, what you're sharing is now and later.
Yeah.
This is something that we need to implement in our churches now, and also for those to come in the years to come.
Yeah.
But we have to start, and we have to start being intentional right now. Thank you for sharing this. This is not many people are talking about how we reach Gen Alpha because it's so new, but we have to be doing this. So thank you for sharing this
My pleasure.
today.
Thank you.
Marianne, you talked about crepe myrtle and it dying. I've got to confess, when I was a little boy, we used to love to get the closed blooms of crepe myrtle, squeeze the bottom of them, and watch them blossom quickly. It's almost like immediate time lapse in front of you. And as I was listening to Dale, I was thinking through, that's what children's ministry is about. We get to watch them blossom so quickly. They learn new language. I mean, they're picking up new words, new items. I mean, it's like they're a new person every year. And children's ministry, you get to see the immediate reward of their development. And I just love how he talked through. If you're not familiar with Gen Alpha and you're in children's ministry, you're missing it, because that's who you're engaged with. Josh, you were about to say something when I jumped in.
No, well, I just love the fact that Dale has always placed an emphasis on the environment in which you create for them. They have to know that we as leaders see them, and they have been intentional, and he's very intentional about what he does in his spaces with decorations, with how he sets up room. And he gave so many different things with points to that, decorating the nursery and preschool rooms with Bible verses and encouraging leaders to pray over them. And one of the things that I love that, I have been guilty of this, and I'm going to go back and reevaluate, he said, replace video games with large physical games, like things that get them active, because I have noticed within the confines of our middle school rooms, we have all these game systems and everything, and they're all gathered around looking at a TV. And every now and then there'll be something exciting happen where they're cheering, but it's basically all staring at one thing rather than interacting with each other. And I think that they get plenty of that on the outside. And it was really, it helped me, it convicted me, I need to really focus on incorporating, like you said, meaningful face-to-face interactions with ministry, because it gives our leaders, it's taking away that time for them to connect with them on a face-to-face level. And that's where true ministry happens, is that 15 minutes before and after class, much more so than in the teaching sometimes.
That's right. And, I've done some research this year, and our student ministry made that shift this year because millennials, there's some new stats out that are saying millennials and Gen Z are not landing jobs because they're not giving eye contact in job interviews. And because everything in their world is digital, so it's pulling their countenance down. So they don't even know how to look you in. And I'll just be honest with you guys, if you're not going to look me in the eye, I don't trust you, and I'm not going to hire you. And so we've got to teach, especially with faith formation, there's so much about the heart, and we connect with the heart when we get the five senses. And I just love that he brought that up, that have things for them to look each other in the face. And so in our student ministry, there's been a huge emphasis with our student pastor of, we need to do things in circles. We need to do things where they're having to answer questions and have eye contact and shake hands and introduce themselves and answer questions on the fly, because they're learning about just life engagement.
You're describing soil that's different from the soil they encounter every day. And while we shouldn't have church as a compartment, we should teach that new soil that goes home with them, not to where when they come to church, they find the same things they find at home. I love that, Marianne, with that.
I love that.
And we're prepping them. He was very intentional when he said, when he was talking about the soils, he was saying 70% of the nuns grew up in church. That meant 78% of your kids may turn out to be nuns, and that's close to the percentage that Barna and Lifeways reported at 64% will walk away from church and or their faith. So these are very high stats that are in there. And then he goes from the three soils to, which were disillusioned with church, don't believe the Bible, and they get too busy as they get older, and makes the comparison to wet cement that is hardening and forming, and that impressionable time during children's ministry. What should that tell our children's ministry, and those who are youth ministers who are getting the children? What should that tell them from what Dale has given us?
That tells us all, parents, parents are vital. I want to say two things. Number one, our fraction that we talk about at D6 Family often is 1/168. And he really, really comes in strong with the quote from George Barna that says, the first one to a child's heart wins, which supports the 1/168 model, in that as church leaders, as ministry leaders, we may have the attention, spiritual formation and attention of a child's heart for 1 hour out of 168, and it's not enough. And that's why we've got to empower parents. We've got to give them on-ramps to be the primary spiritual influences in the child's life. And I want to say one other thing to that I think just coincides so perfectly with what Dale Hudson is saying. There is an app out there called the 30 Days app by Richard Ross. And you guys, if you have a preteen, I'd say even fourth or fifth grade, if you want a tangible way to go hard after the heart of your child and be that winner, get there first. He said it over and over and over in the interview, get there first. This is an easy, strategic way, parents, to get there first. And if you're a ministry leader, put this app up on the screen so parents can scan the QR code and get that app as they're dropping their kids off into the ministry. You're setting parents up to win with this app because it's powerful. It's really living out the get there first mindset.
Yeah, I would argue that in children's ministry, Dale, what Marion just said, the first one to their heart wins their heart. And I would say as a teenager, the second one to get to their heart overtakes that first one. And that's often a best friend, somebody they're dating, And this app that Marianne has just talked about is, if you've seen the loss of the connection to your teen's heart, the 30 Days app will help you recapture that moment. So I would say go for it. She's spot on with her insights. Well, next week we're going to take a look at Kelly Mentor. She's a very gifted leader of Bible study development and women's ministry. She's got great insights, and I'm looking forward to us listening to her talk about the opportunity of our kids who invite their friends over and how we can lean in to minister to them. That's a wonderful mission field all of its own. So we're in this theme of kids ministry. So Dale Hudson talked about it from you being a ministry leader. Now let's look at it from you being a parent when we come back next week with Kelly Mentor.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.